Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. Thank you everyone for joining me today. We're talking about your end of financial year in Console Cloud. My name's Emma and online with me is Jason and we're the product training managers at Console. And today we're really just making sure that you're prepared and ready for your end of financial year in cloud and how that's going to work as well. So we'll be going through from the very basics about what a financial year statement is, how to send your statements, alongside how to amend incorrect statements and things like that as well. So we do understand it's a busy time of year for everyone and especially real estate officers. Not only are you doing your own end of financial year, but you also have to make sure all your owners have their information. So let's try and answer as many questions as we can as we go as well, but we will have a Q&A at the end of the session. If you do, however, have any questions while we are going along, just pop your questions into that little Q&A option at the bottom of the screen. Jason, who's online with me, will be able to answer those questions, or if I do happen to see them, I might be able to answer them while we're live as well. Otherwise, as I said, we will have some time at the end of today or at the end of the session to go through some more questions and answers as well. So let's jump on in. First things first, we're going to look at what a financial year statement is. So simply put, a financial year statement is a summary of income and expenses for each owner each property that your owner owns. So each owner will receive one statement per one property. So as you can see by the image here, the statement displays details, GST amounts, income and expenses, and it really just makes it simple for your owners to clearly see the ins and outs of what's been going on with each property. But let's talk about next how end of financial year works in Console Cloud. So it's important to understand this because it is different and it's actually a lot more simple than what you might think. You might think you haven't done it, but you actually have. So it's very simple to do in cloud. If you are coming from Gateway, you will notice quite a difference as well, or even any other service softwares, you'll probably notice quite a difference in itself as well. So unlike other systems, your financial year statements are generated automatically in the background. So what this actually means is there's nothing that you need to do or to trigger for the system to create these. The statements are all essentially collated from the dissections that are used in Console Cloud. So it's really important, firstly, to make sure that they are all correct. And we'll also have a look at those dissections next to see what that means as well. So your financial year statements are generated for all owners with the exception of your inactive owners. So if you do have any inactive owners currently that you would like to send a financial year statement for, if you haven't already sent it as part of your inactive process, then you will need to activate them to then regenerate or to then generate that statement for them at financial year time. However, you can also produce them now if they are inactive and you want to just go ahead and send off a statement for them now. There's no more financials happening for that particular owner, so you can send it at this stage for them as well, and we'll show you how to do that too. So it also calculates the total of each dissection used since the last financial year, and it's used for taxational purposes, and of course they're available to print at any time. So let's have a look at printing or reprinting those financial year statements. So you might need to do this if you've corrected information, you want to resend or reprint, or perhaps you'd like to do this as a bit of a trial run before your actual financial year itself. So what we'll actually do is jump into Cloud now, and I'm going to go to Accounts and select Reports. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit because that might just be a little bit small for some of us, and if you've got eyes like me, which I am blind, then you want to probably see it a little bit bigger. So hopefully that's a bit better. So if I drop down the reports options here, you've got the option of financial year statements. Now from here, I want to choose my current year. So this is my financial year that I'm in. Now I can choose to do this for all owners, or perhaps I just want to check this specific owner. I've got one owner who I know always contacts me every year, and I want to be really crystal clear that their financial year is correct. I can go ahead and search for that particular owner, or maybe I want to go through everyone and just make sure, just do my due diligence and make sure it's all good. So what I can do is select all. Now, what I'm actually going to do is make sure that I'm selecting download all statements. You do not want to select this send statements yet, because that would then send it off to those owners. But right now, all we're doing is checking them and have a look at what they look like. So then I can just hit download, and that's going to generate a zip folder for me, which will then have all of my owners' financial year statements up as they are. So essentially an interim statement. So I can go ahead and open that. Oops, opened up on my other screen. Let me bring that over for you. There it is there. So I can have a look. Yep, I'm pretty comfortable with how all that is. That looks pretty good to me. I can close that off. I'm happy with that. So if I wanted to do for a specific owner, so perhaps you have an inactive owner that you've just reactivated and you want to send them a new statement, you can open that there and you can go ahead and send it straight away. Otherwise, you can download it and again, preview it first. So let's download it. We'll have a little look. So we've got one for each owner. You can have a look there. If I'm happy with that, I can say, yep, I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and send it. So that would be for an owner that may be inactive and I want to send it to them now. So it might be part of your, when you do lose a management and you make an owner inactive, you can go ahead and before making them inactive, you can jump straight into this reports option and send it off for them there as well. So that's generating your financial year report. So that might be for a trial or it might be for your inactive owners or even just reprinting them at any stage. So let's take a look at dissections. So I know most of you likely know what dissections are, but we're just going to reiterate what essentially they do in Cloud. So end of financial year, your statements are created from these dissections in Cloud, and they're used to identify all your income and expenses, your maintenance expenses, and also your capital purchases. So to break it down, Console Cloud's equivalent, it's essentially Console Cloud's equivalent of a chart of account codes, and they're used to group that income and expense transactions together and then create those financial year statements. So Console Cloud has a number of preset dissections as well that you may have noticed, and they're automatically set for your agency fees, also expenses, and for rent commission fees and sundries, letting fees and rent as well, which is also set to income. So these are automated dissections that you don't need to select when you're making those payments. So you'll always know that they're correct. So your expense dissections will only be available when you create a payment or bill in Cloud. So what this means is there's really not much room for error when it comes to generating those financial year statements. You know you're not going to accidentally select an income dissection rather than an expense or vice versa. You're always going to be choosing the right area of dissection. So it does really, really help with those, with human error, essentially. So let's go and have a look at dissections. We'll break it down a little bit further. So if I do want to perhaps create a new dissection, under my dissections list is where I can do that. So here I'm looking at all of my current dissections that I have. You can see these little locked ones are my preset ones as well. I can see from the columns if they're going to appear on my financial year statement and if they have GST as well. So these are all my income. I can jump over to expense as well and see what's going on in there too. Clicking if you want to open one, you can see whether or not it includes or excludes GST, whether you want to show it on financial year statements or disable that, you have the option there. Or if you need to make it inactive, if it hasn't got any transactions against it, you can do so as well. If I need to add a new one, so it might be that you want to create a new dissection because perhaps this year you would like to charge your end of financial year statement fees, as an example. So you might want to give it the name, end of financial year statement fee. Does it include GST or would you like it to show on your financial year statement? Select all of that and then just hit create. Now I know I've already got one, so I'm not going to recreate one. Otherwise, you might want to put that under your admin fees or your sundry fees if you choose to. So there you go, your dissections there. Now, with your dissections as well, if you have come from Gateway, then you may notice something called the external financials, which is part of your owners. So what this means is your owners will have a consolidated financial year statement. Now, this isn't just for Gateway users. If you have come from another software and you would actually like to consolidate your financial year statements for your owners, you can do so using the external financials. Now, this could sound like gobbledygook right now, so let's jump in and take a look at what that actually means. So under my banking, first off, I want to scroll down and make sure that I have external financials in an end of financial year statement turned on. Once I turn that on, what that means for me, if I jump into one of my owners, is it's going to open up this tab called external financials. So I can see I've got an expense here. Now, this may have come across from my Gateway Migrate. So this would be any dissections that were allocated this financial year. If I've only just migrated over the last couple of months, I'd see these come over as well. And I can have a look at that information. Now, again, if you haven't come from Gateway, but you've come from another software and you would still like to consolidate those financial year statements, you can still create them in here as well. So it might be that you want to create an external transaction. You can put in the date, so make sure that it's within this financial year. Pop in the amount. If there's any GST applicable for this particular one, you can leave the source system and the transaction type. Let's say this one might be rent, as an example. Choosing my rent income. What kind of payment was it? And hit save. And that's going to then add to that rent dissection that I've just added here. That's going to then consolidate into part of my financial year statement. So when I regenerate my financial year statement, then I'll have that applicable for me as well. Now, when I do add these, it's also important to note that if you are adding them, that it can take a little bit to appear on the financial year statement when you do reprint them. So it might take up to 20 minutes to half an hour to then actually appear on a regenerated financial year statement. So just make sure you give that a little bit of time to update everything before you go ahead and send that off to your owners. Now, this isn't just for adding dissections or consolidating them. You might also want to amend a dissection, so you could add it through here as well by creating them, creating a external dissection or external transaction. So if you do see something wrong when you did that trial run, you might have noticed something wrong on that trial run in one of your owners. You can jump into your external financials to either negate a dissection that you don't want to appear or to add a dissection that you would like to appear. So it gives you a bit of free rein into anything that you may need to amend in that interim period. If you have been using Cloud, though, for most of this financial year, you'll probably notice that your dissections will be on point, as you don't have that room for error where you're selecting an income instead of a expense or vice versa. So we're talking about financial year statement fees as well. Now, we created a dissection in there, but you might also want to raise that fee for your owners. So we'll have a look at how that's actually charged within Cloud. So under settings and agency fee, now I've actually got one set up here at the moment, but if you don't have one set, you can just select add new. You can give it a name, fee, and then choose schedule. I want this to be scheduled yearly. I want it to be charged on the 30th of June. Now, the reason I'm choosing the 30th of June is because that will then be inclusive for this financial year. If I chose the next financial year, then it wouldn't appear on their statement until that following financial year. So depending on how you'd like that to appear, you can choose that to whichever works best for your office or whichever you prefer there. I've got my end financial year statement fee there. I can put in that information and hit create agency fee. Now, I'm not going to create that because I already have some created, but essentially that's all I need to do. So once I've got that in there, I can go ahead and add that to my owners. If I haven't already set that up, add it to their commission and fees list. So I can see they've got the end of financial year statement fee, and that's going to be incurred yearly on the June 30th and charged immediately on that day. So I know that my fees are taken care of. There's nothing that I need to run. There's no wizards I need to run or no pending payments I need to generate. That will just generate for me as long as that's inclusive on my owner's commission and fees list. That's all I really need to do for my end of financial year statement fee. So let's talk a bit more now about preparing for your end of financial year. So we've had a look at, you've done your trial print run. Essentially, and I guess one point that we like to say to our clients is don't overthink it and end of financial year about what you need to do in the system. The system does actually look after quite a bit for you. So with your end of financial year, it's essentially completing a close of month. So you're actually doing business as usual with the additional considerations of sending a financial year statement after the fact. So let's have a look at how that works so you see it as well yourself. So essentially, the first thing you want to make sure you've done is you've receipted everything up to including the 30th of June. Now, for a lot of our clients, they are receipting a day behind. So it might be that on the 1st of July, you've still got rents coming in from the 30th. It's very common. To make sure that those rents are included as part of your financial year statement or that previous financial year, you just need to make sure when you're receipting them in to use the receipted date as the 30th. So what I mean by that, under my receipts, making sure this date is the 30th if that's when it's come in. So using that date, it's still within that financial year, so it'll still be compiled into that financial year statement. So make sure you've done that on the 1st. Ensure that you've entered and processed all your invoices and bills as well prior to the 30th of June disbursement. Now, this is an important one as well. If you do have bills coming up that you know you want to be included for this financial year, you want to make sure you've processed them all on the 30th of June to have them included for that financial year. If you are still receiving cash and checks on hand, make sure you've run your daily banking and it's all been accounted for, and also make sure that you've reconciled your trust for the 30th of June as well. So using that closing statement balance from the 30th of June, you're all in balance and you're all reconciled, and then you're ready to run that disbursement. So in your reconciliation, using your closing statement date as the 30th, make sure you're in balance. And essentially, all you'll need to do is select your close of month. Now, I'm not going to do that just yet, but that's all I really need to do to actually finalise my financial year. Now, if I've done everything that I need to do, I've done my disbursements, I've paid out all of my owners, I've reconciled, everything's all good, I'm then ready to close off that month for June. Once I close that off, then I can actually send out my financial year statements. So a couple of extra points that you might want to do is also check your statement delivery is set for your owner's preferred method. So it might be that you might have some owners that still prefer to have their end of financial year statement posted to them. If you do, just make sure you're jumping into those owners' contacts. So as an example, my owner over here, I want to see what their preferred method is. So if I just go into edit, I can scroll down and choose either print or email. So making sure that they're all accurate for my owners, so that I know when I run it and when I send off my statements, then they're going to receive it in the way that they want to see it as well. You can then do another trial print run if you want to be absolutely sure. So just jumping into those reports again, financial year statements, current and all, and hit download. So again, that's just allowing us to check all those financial year statements before we finally hit that send button when it then goes off to all of your owners. So if you're happy with everything, we've done our receipting, we've processed our bills, we've done our banking, we've reconciled, we've dispersed, we've closed off the month, owners are all set with their statement delivery, we're all good to go, I can go ahead and just select send statements. When I choose yes, that's going to now email or print or prepare a PDF for me to print all of those financial year statements to my owners. So 22 emails have successfully been sent, and I have 10 that have been chosen for print. So I've got this one PDF, so I can just hit Control P. That's going to send it over to my printer, and then I can pop them in the post for my owners to receive. So that's essentially it. That's your end of financial year done. So really, it's nothing outside of business as usual. The main thing is being prepared. Or as long as you've closed off your month for the 1st of June. So once that closed month box opens on the 1st of July, I should say, and you've done your disbursement, you can then close off your month and send off your statements. So as I was mentioning before as well, if you do see anything on a statement that may be incorrect, you can amend things through your external financials tab. If you need to add any dissections in there, If it is relative to GST, so if you do actually find something that you've receipted and it had GST where it shouldn't have, then that's actually transactional specific. So what you would need to do is reverse that transaction and actually regenerate it and assign it to the correct dissection from there. So your GST component will be part of that transaction itself. So it's important to actually amend the transaction because it's not dissection specific for that one. So if you do happen to come across that, that's important to note as well. If you have something that you don't want to appear on your financial year statements as well, so you may have noticed a dissection that actually you don't want to be part of that end of financial year statement. Again, you can just choose to untick show on financial year statements and save those changes, and then that won't appear for you. So that is a global setting for that one. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys and see if you've got any questions, anything specific about your financial year and what I can answer for you. I've got a question from Val. I found last year pending payments entered in the system prior to the 30th were not included in the financial year statement as an expense. However, once they were processed, say sometime in July, they were, if you were to reprint the end of financial statement, it would change the end of financial year statement and include that expense. Okay, I'm not sure about that one, Val. If it's got your payment date entered for the 30th and it's been processed before the 30th, then it certainly should be included as part of your financial year for that year. So, yeah, I can have a look into it, but I haven't actually heard that one come up before. Let me take those details down. I had that problem last year and was told differently. I don't know, Val. I'll have to have a look into that one for you because, yeah, as I said, I haven't actually heard of that coming up as an issue where payments processed after the fact. Is that what you mean? So processed after the first, if they were entered as a pending payment or the 30th. Is that what you mean, Val? I'll just wait for you to get back to me on that one. Linda, will owners still receive their end of month statement? Yes, they will. So if you're doing your month close, they'll still receive their end of month statement if you choose to send your, or depending on how you've got your database set up. So if you're doing your disbursement, they'll receive their statement per disbursement, or otherwise, if it's on close, they'll receive it at close. So when you do that tick box to close the month before you send off your financial year statement, they'll receive their end of month statements then as well. Val, so not as pending payments, but paid after the first. Oh, okay. Val, I'll have to look into that one. So I haven't actually heard of payments that are generated for the next financial year to be inclusive of part of the last financial year. That certainly shouldn't be occurring. So I might look into it for you, Val, and I'll just take down your name and get back to you to make sure, obviously, it doesn't happen for you this year. When rent is received on the 1st of July and we do the close of month for the 30th of June, rent will be added as income in the end of financial year. However, we already done disbursement on the 30th. So if you are doing your disbursement on the 30th, but you're still receiving rent on the 1st, is that what you're saying? For backdating from the 30th? Rather than doing your disbursement on the 1st? Yep. So it's really up to you and your business on how you prefer to do that. So if you wanted to do backdating, yep. So if you are backdating for the first, for rents coming in on the 30th, then just making sure you're putting in the 30th as the receipted date. That will be included for the last financial, for that financial year. However, if you're dispersing on the 30th, so when you're paying out your owners on the 30th, they obviously won't have those funds sent to them as part of the end of month statements because those funds won't have been receipted in until the 1st. So that end of month statement won't match up their end of financial year statement. So what you might be better off in doing in that case is actually doing your disbursement on the 1st after you know you've received everything up to and inclusive for the 30th. So then when you are dispersing, your owner's end of month statements and end of financial year statements will match up in that case. So then you're including all the rents you've received for that financial year. Does that make sense? Yeah. So doing your disbursement on the 1st of July. So if you're expecting to be receiving rents for the 30th, which I'm sure most of you would be, then you can do your actual disbursement on the 1st of July. So it's all inclusive for that. And that way they'd still receive their financial year statements after the fact. And then the end of month statements would be matching that as well, if that makes sense. So yeah, do all your receipting first. So like we were sort of saying on here, do all your receipting first, make sure you backdate it for the 30th, and then reconcile, then do your disbursement within that same process. Once you've done your disbursement, then do your close, and then you can send off those financial year statements. Do we need to run an end of financial year if we've migrated over from the old console in the old console software as well? No, you don't. So your end of financial year can all be done within cloud. So your end of financial year statements will be consolidated from Gateway. So all your dissections will come across. Any that were entered from this financial year will actually come across to be a consolidated financial year statement for your owners. So you don't actually need to run any reporting or anything within Gateway because all of that will be inclusive within cloud itself. So you'll still have all your auditing for auditing purposes, you'll still have it all in Gateway, but you actually don't need to run another financial year close on a superseded software. So everything current is in cloud. You only need to do it in cloud. Does that make sense? Oh, thank you, Val. I'll have a look back at that and see what was going on with those payments. All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, I'll hang around for another couple of minutes in case there are any final questions to come through. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming along and keeping me company today. We've finished right on time. Kirsty, we're doing our close on the 29th of June, so it'll be 2 days rent to allocate for before the close and financial year run. These 2 days and invoices paid won't appear on our end of financial year statements, will they? Only what shows on their monthly statements. So with that, Kirsty, if you are backdating and you're doing your receipts and you're entering the receipt days as the 29th or the 30th, then they can still be inclusive in your end of financial year run. So until you do your actual end of month close, so I assume you might be doing it still on the 1st, is that right? Or are you actually going to, because you won't actually be able to close off the month on the 29th because your little closed box won't be open for you to do so. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so when you do that close, before you do it, make sure when you've re-entered or when you've entered those last 2 days, so the 29th and the 30th, any rents that are coming there, just make sure that you're using that receipt date as the 29th or the 30th, and they can be included as part of that first. What you might just want to do as well is run your invoices and bills on the 29th. So if you're doing your invoices and bills, run them all on the 29th. So the ones that you want to be included for that financial year, do so then. You can then do your disbursement on the 1st still. If you want to include those last two days of rents as well, you can do the disbursement on the 1st. However, if you have an office procedure where you're doing it on the 29th for external reasons, then that's okay as well. Will owners question why their income hasn't been paid out to them? So if you are doing a disbursement on the 29th and then you're doing their end of financial year statement on the 1st, then potentially they might, because they won't marry up. So you might be better off even doing a secondary payment out on the 1st just to fully disperse all of those owners. It's really an office choice if you'd prefer to do that. Remember that your disbursement, your end of month and your end of financial year are all 3 mutually exclusive things. So you can disperse at any time. The main point is to make sure that when you are dispersing, so with your, when you are dispersing, you're including everything, obviously, for that financial year. But yeah, you might choose to do 2 just to make sure they marry up. And depending on how your cloud database is set, if you have them set to receive a statement upon each disbursement, then they'd actually see what's being paid on the 29th and then see what's being paid on the 1st. Or otherwise, if you've just got it for the 30 for the end of month close, they'd just receive that one consolidated end of month statement, and then that would just marry up with their end of financial year anyway. That makes sense. Val, so just to confirm, inactive owners will need to be reactivated so they can be included in the bulk send. And yes, that's right, Val. So if you do have inactive owners that you'd like to send a financial year statement to, you can jump in there and mark them as active to then resend it. So, or to then send it, sorry. So just jumping in, I jump into one of my inactive ones, you'll just see that little option to make active. So once I make him active, if they've got financial year or financials to send, then they'll be included in my financial year run. Now, you can really manage this on a case-by-case basis. Because they are inactive, you have still been providing them with their monthly statements. So they actually have everything that they need as part of their accounting to go ahead and go through their tax. So you may only just want to generate the ones that come through to you. If a client calls and says, you know, I want to get a financial year statement, then you can go ahead and just send a one-off when they come through, if you do have quite a few that you want to go back and reactivate. Otherwise, if you do want to provide it as a service and you want to reactivate them as part of your financial year run anyway, then yeah, just jumping into those owners that are inactive and making them active again as part of your bulk sending or as a individual lot. Thanks, Val. Any more questions, guys? All right, well, we might leave it there then. Thanks everyone for coming along. Wishing you all a happy end of financial year. I'm sure you will be just fine. Remember, if you do get stuck on the day or coming up to, you can jump onto our website, help.consult.com.au. We've got our live chat there for us to help. Give us a call, or we've also got our Consult Nebula, which has all our online training resources as well. But otherwise, thanks for your company, and I hope you have a very successful end of financial year. Thanks, everyone.